So I'm a 10-year-old boy,
Okay.
and I've never had a reptile.
Okay.
What would you recommend?
Generally speaking, there's a few go-tos that we stick with. If they want a lizard, it's usually the easiest are bearded dragons, leopard geckos, Christa geckos, gargoyle geckos, things like that that are going to be a little bit simpler, a little bit more common. There's about 4 or 5 go-to snakes that we like to rely on that make good pets with little extra care. He's done a lot of research and is really, you get a feel for him when you talk to him for a while. And some kids can do better with stuff that's a little bit more complicated right off the bat. So like we could do frilled dragons, which is what I keep at home. It's frilled dragons, there's blue-tongued skinks, there's chameleons, there's all these different kinds of geckos and stuff that aren't necessarily much harder, but they're a lot less common.
Okay.
So they don't get recommended as often just because they're a little bit more uncommon and might be a little bit harder for somebody unfamiliar with them to care for them. So it depends a lot on the individual kid. I mean, there's the stuff that everybody's got, and it's kind of like getting a pet lab versus going and getting like a labradoodle or getting like a Chinese hairless crested.
Right.
They're not that much harder to care for, not that much different to care for.
Right.
It's just a little bit different. So there's hundreds of different kinds of reptiles and amphibians and anything that you can get, anything you can dream of. So it just ends up being limited by what mom and dad want to deal with
Right.
and what the kid is really into.
So basically, how much maintenance? Some reptiles require a lot more maintenance than
like
others.
a snake, for example. Most snakes you're dealing with once or twice a week. You really need to do intensive care where you're cleaning out poop, you're cleaning out the water bowl really thoroughly, feeding them, just double checking them. A lot of the North American species, corn snakes, king snakes, rosy boas, stuff like that, next to no maintenance.
Oh, wow, okay.
Tropical animals are going to require a lot more. Anything that's up in the trees that's going to be a tropical animal, those require daily misting and tinkering with their environment to make sure that they stay humid enough.
Right.
Anything from the desert, also going to be low maintenance because that's the environment that we're in, so they don't need that kind of the same level of care every single day that a trop lizards and stuff are going to require daily maintenance because they just need to eat cooler weather. Any cool weather animals, so Christa geckos, crocodile geckos, red-eyed croc skinks, things like that that like it a little bit cooler, you're only feeding them a couple times a week.
Okay.
Snakes once a week, maybe every 2 weeks for a larger species or snakes that eat larger prey items. Anything that's out during the day, so a daytime or diurnal basking animal, those are going to eat daily just about.
So basically, like with anything that's in the cold has a slower metabolism. Is that why they're not eating as much then? Is that
much slower metabolism? They just don't need as much to maintain themselves. It does take them longer to grow, longer to mature, longer to breed, incubate. All of that is slowed down.
Okay.
But on the flip side, they have a longer lifespan.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the diurnal daytime animals, they have a higher metabolism, so they work a lot faster. It's one of the fun things about reptiles that you end up learning about all of that kind of stuff when you mess with them. Chameleons are a little bit sensitive a lot of the time. So, hi, buddy, come here. I'm glad. No, I want you because you're green.
Wow, you're really comfortable handling these guys. Wow.
So as he's got his mouth open to kind of tell me to go away.
Right.
Yeah, chameleons you don't want to handle because they're actually very sensitive.
Okay, like as far as they would get stressed out, they could like have like a heart attack. I mean, I'm just asking basic questions, but I mean,
they're not going to have a heart attack. But what ends up happening is that they start to have difficulties, like they won't eat, they won't drink as much, they'll just kind of hide and turn dark.
Okay, so if they're stressed out, they'll...
Yeah, they're not going to have a heart attack and die overnight, but it's more of a slow decline where you can't pinpoint any one thing that's really wrong.
Right.
The only thing that's wrong is that they're stressed. So if they're in a high traffic area, if there's too many people going by, you're handling them too much, staring at them too much sometimes.
Wow, okay.
Some species are a lot more sensitive than others.
Okay.
That particular Jackson's chameleon was not very thrilled with us. This little guy is a little bit more used to people.
Aww. Yeah, about how old is he?
He's about 3 or 4 months. He was captive bred.
Okay.
So which by default makes them more used to people.
Right.
He'll eat crickets, worms, sit here all hunched up on my thumb and pretend like we can't see him.
Right, he's trying to hide.
Yeah. So for people that are getting their first reptile pet, we usually recommend captive bred animals like this because they're going to be a lot easier for them to care for.
Are you able to tell if they're male or female on these kind, or?
On this one, not right now because it's too little.
Right.
But when it gets older, the males will have distinctive boy parts, and females don't. You've just got shed skin all over your face, buddy.
Does that mean that he's growing?
Yep. They get they shed their skin whenever they grow, and whenever it's just plain getting worn out. So
now, what do these chameleons eat?
Anything that can fit in their mouth.
Okay.
So crickets, mealworms, all the different kinds of worms, tomato worms, hornworms, silkworms, waxworms, reptile worms. They'll even eat baby mice, hissing cockroaches.
Oh, okay.
There's about 5 different species of roaches that we carry. We don't usually carry them in the store. You can't keep them in a retail store. Hissing cockroaches, you can.
Right.
The rest we just have to ship to you, and you would start your own colony of them.
Right.
I personally keep in a large colony of dubia roaches, which are about that big, and they make a really great feeder insect because they're a little bit more balanced as far as nutrient content, protein, calcium, all that kind of stuff. When you start getting really into the reptiles, you start learning about the different ratios, calcium to phosphorus, why it matters. If you don't give them a correct diet, if you don't supplement them correctly, if you don't light them correctly, the animal really does not do well.
Right.
So it's important to learn about that, which is why some animals do better than others.
Right.
Because they're much easier.
Yes, yes.
So, but these, all of them, they're going to be eating as wide a variety of insects and occasional rodents as possible. You want to give them as many different things to eat as possible, because in the wild, they're eating hundreds of insects.
Right.
Activity, we're limited to only a couple dozen
Right.
at most. So you want to not only give them as many different things as possible, but you also want to use a high-quality reptile multivitamin every time you feed them. Just
Right.
veiled chameleons, panther chameleons, even occasionally the Jacksons and other larger species, they will graze on leaf matter. So that's why we use ficus trees in our cages, because those, if they nibble on them, they're going to be next to toxic. The sap can sometimes irritate the eye.
Snakes. You've got
Snakes
the snakes.
are one of my favorite.
Are they? Now
animals.
tell me how long you've been, you must have a love for these. How did you develop this love for reptiles?
From what I hear, I was just born that way. I just came out wanting snakes when I was 5. I don't even remember this, but when I was 5 years old, I decided what I wanted most in this world was a snake. And my dad made me this deal that if I saved up enough money for the snake, he'd buy the cage. I still have that snake because I did it. I did it for my 5th birthday.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I got a ball python, which I think we have somewhere.
So you still have this snake since you were 5 years old?
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
We'll go check out. Oh, hi guys. You can
See, I was that way with horses, and I got my first horse at 13. Oh, watch it here.
There we go. So this is a ball python.
Oh wow.
They get bigger than this. This is a juvenile. But this is one of the species that I got when I was a little kid. They're called ball pythons because when they get scared, they'll ball up.
Oh, okay.
In the U.S., this is the only place they're called ball pythons. Everywhere else in the world, they call them royal pythons. Because legend has it, rumor has it, that Queen Cleopatra used to wear them as jewelry. She'd wear them as a necklace. She'd wear them as bracelets. Because once they get used to you, they just sit and they hang out. They just don't do a whole heck of a lot.
Do you think they can build a relationship with you? Like you've had this snake, you've had your snake for so long. Like
she depends on how you define relationship. It's not like she's going to come when she's called.
No.
It's not like some snakes have personalities for sure. Like this one doesn't like its head being messed with. You see, it keeps moving away.
Right.
She doesn't like hers messed with either. Depending on who it is. Like I can sit there and mess with her. I can grab her, fling her around. I usually take her to library presentations and things because she really doesn't care.
Right.
A stranger messing with her face, she's not comfortable. She darts away, she hides. On me, she'll sit there and she'll just sit there. She'll hang out, she'll look around, but she'll really just sit there on a stranger, non-stop movement.
So there is a level of trust then.
Yes,
maybe,
there's
that
a certain,
would
it depends on how you want to call it. Is she just accustomed to me and my smell? Is she just accustomed to the way that I move? Do we just have a mutual tolerance of each other? Does she know who I am? How do you know?
How do you know?
It's one of those little things that that reptile people, that is one of the things we'll argue about, is
Right.
whether or not how well they really know you. There is some certain amount of recognition. How far it really goes is kind of one of those things that's hard to decide. How do you? It's not like it's going to wag its tail. And even here in the store, between the staff members and the animals in here, like it's blood pythons, for example, they can tell confidence too. If we were to make one of the guys grab them, these would probably bite them because they can be a little bit on the snappy side, to put it nicely. But if you pick them up with confidence, you're gentle, you're calm, you don't scare them, don't poke them, they're really not that bad. These are one of my favorite more advanced species, just because their attitudes can make them a little bit much for the average beginner. But they get big, they get fat, and they're gorgeous little snakes. They're really pretty. But you see, I'm having no problems with them. You give it to a stranger or to somebody who doesn't know how to work with them, it'll sit there, it'll get all tense and just start striking nonstop. Body language is everything. Godzilla were to pick us up and sit there and hold us, if Godzilla was scared, you'd probably be scared too. Imagine if something's big enough to scare Godzilla, you better be scared.
Yeah.
You better get away. And for them, they don't know that the reason you're scared is them.
Right.
As far as they're concerned, you're scared of something else bigger and meaner that's coming by, so they better get scared too and get away, bite you so you let them go, and then they can bolt so that you don't eat them and whatever's scaring you doesn't eat them.
Wow. That's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, they're...
Yeah.
And snakes, reptiles, all of them are honestly very simple creatures. They're, you know, when they're this size, stuff eats them.
Right.
Stuff eats them all the time. So if you think about it from that perspective, suddenly it makes a lot of sense as to why some animals are going to be more aggressive than others, why as babies they're more skittish, more nervous, as compared to an adult. Favorite lizards. Hi guys, come here.
Wow. Now I noticed these, I came over and looked at these, that these were really active.
Yeah, these are Berber skinks. These are one of those funny animals that some reptiles just don't care about people and are totally fine with us. And we'll just come out and hang out, come up, eat out of our hands, do lizard stuff, like crawl on our back.
Wow.
Come here. Where are you going?
Wow.
So they make good pets because of that. They're also really inexpensive. So this is another lizard that's good for beginners just because they're not too big. They're really easy. They're just not captive bred in large numbers. So
right.
If you don't set them up right, you can have troubles just because they'll develop.
Oh, I see them up in your hair. Now these guys are together.
Ideally, you would always keep them by themselves. These ones, if you'll notice, all have nipped tails, regrown tails.
Right.
This is a primarily female group. They've been laying eggs and breeding with each other. This female, you see, she got herself beat up pretty bad. Often nip on the tails and bite them, and basically that's how they control them. And the females too will battle for hierarchy. You are determined to be on my head. Both of you.
Wow.
Okay, that's happening.
Yeah, they're going on your head.
Okay.
Just for good film.
So they do fight for dominance. They do fight to establish a hierarchy. They do fight, and it's kind of, we've got them set up in a way that they're able to get away from each other. It's kind of inevitable. They all came in with regrown tails. They are still arguing, but they're not fighting as bad as they were.
I would think, though, the only hard part would be if you had like I'm thinking of my son, you know, one could get away from him real quick.
Yes.
So that would be...
Yeah, they will run away, they will walk away. So, and again, it depends on the kid. Some lizards are going to move a lot slower than others. These ones are a little bit more active, but if it's a kid that's already like catching lizards in the yard and has played with the classroom pet, or even if it's a classroom that's looking for a pet, wants a nice active animal to be out that doesn't get as big as a bearded and doesn't require as much food as a bearded, because these are just plain smaller. They don't need to eat as much.
Right.
These make good pets. These make good options.
Have you ever had anything actually breed in here and have babies?
All the time.
Wow.
It's a... Not to brag,
right.
But it's a nice sign that you're taking care of them well, that you're doing a good job caring for them. If they all start breeding, if you start seeing breeding behavior, copulation, eggs laid, babies born. We've had sand boas give birth here. A few different species of pythons have laid eggs here. Our Berber skinks all laid eggs. Our fire skinks, actually, those are adorable.
Let's see those.